Hey, what's up guys, JayzTwoCents here, and I'm gonna take a look today at a product that you guys have said over and over and over again, this should go in Skunkworks, this belongs in Skunkworks, put this in Skunkworks. Well guys, we're not putting it in Skunkworks, but we're gonna go ahead and take a look at it anyway, and that is Gigabyte's X99-UD4P X99 motherboard, obviously. It's got a black and yellow theme, which obviously is why everyone's like, put this thing in Skunkworks! Well, I'm not tearing Skunkworks all apart again. It's a lot of work. And I'm lazy. The built-in res and water pump mounting locations, improved airflow, and massive radiator support make the Define S from Fractal Design the obvious choice for water cooling enthusiasts. The S doesn't stand for sexy, but it should. So before we talk about the motherboard, let's go and talk about what comes in the packaging. You get this kind of a crazy 8-pin CPU powered daisy chain thing. I'm not exactly sure what you would use that for. I've never seen one before. I'll have to get back to you on that. Probably one of the nicest looking I/O shields that I have ever seen because the thing freaking lights up. I mean, that is amazing. I wish I was actually installing this in something today so that we could light this bad boy up, but it has an LED that lights along the side, and it's got a clear acrylic cover on here, and this whole thing kind of lights up. So it's illuminated. So when you're trying to plug things in back there, it's actually easy to find, and there's the power plug for that right there. You do get your Crossfire bridge, because of course this is an SLI and a Crossfire capable motherboard. You get some really slick braided SATA cables, which is really nice. I've never seen that come with a motherboard before either. Usually you just get the rubberized kind of generic looking ones. But you've got one that's a dual 180 plug and then one that's a 180 with a 90 plug. Actually, you get 4 of those because here's another package of them. Now this motherboard is compatible with up to 4-way SLI. So you get your little flexible SLI bridge. You get 2 different 3-way SLI bridges here with 2 different spacing configurations, which I think is kind of odd. But anyway, you do get 2 of those. And then you've got your 4-way SLI bridge. They're all rigid bridges as well, so they're not going to bend or move around, and they can actually give a little bit more support to your GPU. And then of course you have your product manuals and driver disc and case badges. But of course, here is the star of the show right here. Now, I think it is an extremely slick looking design. I mean, it's all black, it's a matte black with just a couple of gold and yellow accents where it matters. So it gives you that nice black and yellow theme, but it doesn't overpower you with too much yellow. For PCI Express connectivity, you've got 2 PCI Express 3.0 or Gen 3 16X, 2 3.0 8X, and then you've got 1, 2, 3 PCI Express 1X. So you've got a lot of compatibility on here for expansion cards, things like sound cards and network cards and RAID cards and things like that. You've also got on the bottom here auxiliary power for the PCI Express lanes, which is a 4-pin Molex. So if you're running 3 or 4-way configs, it's usually recommended that you plug in auxiliary power to supply more direct power to the PCI Express lanes. That way you're not drawing too much through the motherboard and you don't cause a fire or put it up in smoke or anything like that. So it's definitely recommended. Now speaking of Illumination, the chipset also has a lighted heatsink on there. Again, I'm gonna have to find something to build with this thing because this is just too badass to pass up. It's got a heat pipe that runs from the chipset up to the VRM cooler as well, so you've got some heat convection there that's moving the heat away from the motherboard. And one of the ways that Gigabyte is efficiently utilizing space on this motherboard is they've stacked the M.2 slots on this thing. So you've got 2 M.2 that are stacked on top of each other. So you have one on the bottom and one on top. Now the only downside with that would be my concern would be airflow, because M.2 drives can get pretty hot, especially if they're near graphics cards. And when M.2 drives start getting hot, they start slowing down. So I would be a little bit concerned about that, but obviously I would assume they've done their tests and it shouldn't be that big of a deal. But you also have M-SATA slot on here as well. Now speaking of hard drives, this thing actually has 10 SATA 3 6 gigabit per second ports on this thing, as well as SATA Express. And it's capable of onboard RAID controlling for RAID 0, 1, 5, and 10. So you're gonna, especially with the Intel chipset controller for the RAID controller. So you're gonna be getting a lot of connectivity and a lot of just versatility when it comes to the hard drive capabilities of this thing. Over here you have a CPU button, which is gonna be default CPU mode and overclock CPU mode, where basically you can flip that switch and kind of get a factory overclock on your CPU without having to really do anything. These companies like Gigabyte have really started spending a lot of time using massive samples of chips that they received during engineering phase and they kind of find what safe overclocks are, depending on kind of the overall percentages of overclocking capabilities of the engineering chips that they receive. So you can flip that switch with confidence that you're going to get an overclock. It's more than likely going to be very stable, and it's not going to push your CPU too hard to where you cause any sort of damage, which you could do in the BIOS, especially when you start messing around with voltages. Let's go ahead and take a look at how many fan headers we have on here. It looks like they're all PWM. I don't see any 3-pin fan slots, so that's good. That means you could have control of all of your fans if you're using PWM fans. We've got one up here on the top, so let's see, we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Looks like we've got 5 fan slots on this thing, which should be more than enough. Most of the time you can run daisy chained fans off of a single header up to about 1 amp. So depending on how much amperage your fans are drawing, sometimes you can get 3, 4, 5, even 6 fans on a single header if they're very low speed, low demand fans. I want to keep that in mind. Don't think you're going to go putting like 5 jet flows on a single fan header on this thing. You're going to blow up the fan header. So keep that in mind. Now before we wrap up this overview, let's go ahead and talk about what makes this thing UD in the UD4P. Well, UD stands for ultra durable, and that means that they use the highest grade components that they possibly can in this thing. They use a ton of gold content in the pins of the socket. They use very thick PCB layers on this thing. It's very heavy, it's very thick. It doesn't flex easy at all. And they use very high grade components when it comes to things like the chokes and the capacitors on this thing, which are rated much, much higher than you would find on mainstream motherboards. Now, this definitely has all the features that I like to see in motherboards, and it makes me excited. I want to build something with this thing. Don't know what yet, or what I would even necessarily do with the build, but when you see this level of compassion that goes into a motherboard design, it definitely makes you want to build something. I mean, everything about this motherboard is just so nice looking, and because it's on the X99 platform, you know you're going to get great performance. It's got great built-in audio. It's even got a little spot right here where if you're going to add, say, a wireless, using the SATA slot on this thing, they've even thought ahead and put on here a little antenna mount so that you don't have to figure out what you're going to do with the antennas. I mean, it's like every little thing on this motherboard has been completely well thought out. Well, there you go, guys. I don't do many unboxings, but I do like to unbox things that I think are cool, that especially give you a lot of the accessories that you might otherwise have to have purchased, or companies that just think to put things in the box that you just might need. And obviously Gigabyte's done that with the amount of accessories in here, and the fact that this motherboard is so freaking nice, it just deserved to be taken a look at. Now, the one thing I'm a little bit disappointed about, but I guess it just has to do with the timing, is the fact that this does not have USB 3.1. It has tons of USB 3.0 and USB 2.0 with front connectivity and rear connectivity, but the board actually came out before the USB 3.1 standard was kind of becoming more mainstream, like we're seeing now, and more motherboards coming out, especially with all the motherboards at Computex. It seemed like they were all featuring USB 3.1. Unfortunately, this guy doesn't, but I wouldn't be surprised if there's a revision of this in the future adding USB 3.1. So that's really kind of the only thing missing from this motherboard, other than, well, I guess RAM, CPU, graphics card, and all that sort of stuff. Dad jokes, I know. All right, so tell me what you guys think of this UD4P from Gigabyte. It's got, I mean, the illumination on there is really nice. It looks good. It's going to look good in any build you put it in, as long as you stick to it. Black components on top of it or other yellow components, kind of like I've done with Skunkworks over here. What motherboard are you guys using, and what do you look for in motherboards? What's the major selling point that makes you want a motherboard? Motherboards they're not glamorous, and they're kind of tedious to shop for. But when it comes to motherboards, they really do hold a lot of stake in the performance of your machine, so they're definitely something you shouldn't scrimp on. So tell me what you guys think of today's video. I hope you guys have enjoyed this unboxing and overview. I don't do a lot of unboxings and stuff, but I thought that this guy was worth it. So I went ahead and did it for you guys. As always, thanks for watching, and I will see you guys in the next one.